exciting episode of World Bigfoot Radio. Today we have a returning guest that you guys are going to be happy to hear from. He hasn't been on for a while. But before we get to that, some quick notes for everyone. The website is up, worldbigfootcentral.com. Go check it out. We're still doing some work on it, but you can go there. Shows are listed there, and we're going to have some more fun stuff we're going to have set up for you here shortly. And also, and this is going to be really cool, this is something that I'm sure a lot of you can use, because people don't like being hacked. They don't like having people spying on them, knowing every single thing that they're doing. And if you're online, which pretty much everybody is, it behooves you to have some sort of security. And in this case, I'm talking about having your own VPN. Because then hackers and stuff don't know where you're at. They can't find you. You're somewhere else other than where you're at. And it's one of those security things, just like virus protection that you really need. So I was super thrilled to actually partner with this company, ProXPN. That's PROXPN. And they're willing to give you guys a spectacular savings here. So if you want to get a VPN, go to ProXPN, and you can use the coupon code SAVE1975, that's SAVE1975, and get 50% off, which is a great deal. And I'm using the services. I really like it. I think you guys would be really happy with it too, and I recommend them. So if you need more security on your internet, go on over there, check it out, ProXPN, coupon code SAVE1975. And get yourself a 50% discount. Right on, guys. So now we can all be safe and protected, not have people spying on us. So with that,
today's guest, we've got somebody on here who's been really trying to help us out. And how's things over there where you are today?
It's drenching rain. What else is new for Western Oregon?
Yeah. That's why they call it a rainforest over there.
Yeah.
The reason I wanted to have you on the show is because you're one of the few people that I've run across so far that's had an encounter with a Type 3, and you got to see it pretty good and at fairly close range, which, of course, I find interesting because I've never seen one of the things, and I'm hoping that I never do, but it's interesting to hear other people's impressions on what they saw, what it looked like, how it behaved, that whole sort of thing. So if you want to, just take us back. I'm going to shorten your story up a little bit just by quickly filling in some of the background. You were camping at a place. It was a brand new campground. They had just made a man-made lake there.
Right.
And they were in the process of putting in the campgrounds and everything. They had them more or less completed. And this was like the opening weekend or something, and it was in the fall?
I believe it was the opening weekend of Beaver Lake Campground in the Ozarks of Arkansas, and it was in October. For sure, it was in October. And, and we decided to go on this camping trip after we'd heard so much about this place, and we'd made an earlier trip down there when they were constructing it, and it's got to be one of the most beautiful spots in the world. So we planned this camping trip, and it was myself. I was 18, my husband was 20, and my brother was 16. And we three were going to go down there in our 68 Volkswagen van.
Woohoo.
Yeah, we were styling. And I had two little children with us. We had two babies. One, my daughter was 14. This didn't daunt us at all. It's like, we're going camping with the infants. We didn't have a problem with it. I grew up in an Army household, and my dad was a drill instructor, a sniper instructor, and most of all, he taught wilderness training. So we went camping a lot.
Wow.
And
it sounds like you had the perfect person to teach you all about how to do it, too.
We did, and I hated it as a teenager. I absolutely hated him. I hated it. But, and when he retired from the service, his idea of a fun vacation was we went out to Prince William Forest in Virginia, next to Quantico, somewhere around there. And we spent 6 months in the woods in a tent. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
6 months vacation. How'd you pull that one off?
It was horrible, but I did learn a lot, That's moral of the story is listen to Dad. But yeah, yeah. So we weren't daunted at all about taking off and going camping and taking the babies. It didn't matter. So here we are. We're taking off. We're going, and we've got it all planned out. Went down there. We left from Kansas, and got down there. Got there early, and didn't realize it had been raining a lot there. So a lot. Oh yeah. And so part of this project there in Arkansas, this Beaver Lake project, was they built a dam there for hydroelectric power. So we got there. We drove around the area to just check it out, see where we wanted to camp. There was literally no one there. There wasn't even anybody to check us in at the office, at the beginning. So we drove around, went over to the dam part because that's where there was a big swimming portion. They cordoned off. And my husband thought he wanted to go swimming. Ever since we planned this, he wanted to swim there, and he was just, determined to do it. And my brother and I looked at it and said, "Nah, I'm not going in there. It's really gray. The rain just let up. It's got to be cold. Nah, we're not interested." But he was going to go. And where we parked in the parking lot, we had to park way back because the flooding that had occurred had come up into the parking lot from all that rain. And quite a ways out, there was a old tree, a very old tree, big, thick tree with lots of branches, and it was out in the water. It had flooded up quite a ways on that thing. And so my husband says, "Okay, well, I'm going out. I'm going to go swimming." And we were thinking, no, I'd wait at least till a day or two, because it was really floody. It was really cold. But no, he was starting vacation. He was going to go swimming. So he goes out there, and he gets out, not very far, but he started swimming. And he was saying to my brother, "Come on in," but we had no interest, and so we just watched him. Saw him go past the tree. He's swimming away, and then I was taking care of the babies, and I look back and I can't see him.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. And my brother starts yelling and says, "Do you see him?" I say, "No," and so all of a sudden we see his head pop up way past that tree. We see his head pop up and his hand pop up, and we realize he's in trouble. So my brother ran out to the tree. He swam a little bit more and got one of the big branches and held on to the branch, so he was anchored, and it broke off.
Oh, God.
And the current pulled him out to where my husband was. But my brother wasn't winded from swimming for so long like my husband was. He was treading water for a long time, but my brother wasn't. So he had the energy to get the branch out to my husband and pull him and swim back. And he was swimming against a hard current. He told me when he got on shore, he said he was just seconds from giving up. And he got to the shore enough where I was able to drag them in. And apparently it was because they had the dam open, the floodgates were open. And so all the current was pulling hard towards the dam.
Whoa.
Not a good swimming day.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you think there's nobody else there. The weather's inclement. This is a new camp area, so who's ever used this beach before? Probably no one.
No one.
You're the test dummy.
Exactly. And this looked like a good idea. Things you do when you're 18, you know.
Yeah.
Oh golly. So anyway, that was the start to the camping experience. We should have turned around right then and said, "Let's just go home." But no, we decide my husband is like, I'm fine, even though he's vomiting water from his lungs and stomach. He's fine. He's just blue. We're going to go find a campsite. He'll be fine. He just needs to rest. So,
You got to give him points for being rugged, though.
oh man, no kidding. So we get to driving around the area, and he's actually driving. He says, I'm fine, he just looks terrible and coughing constantly. Well, we decide we want to go to one of the farther campsites because we have 2 infants with us, 2 children, 2 babies, and we didn't want them to cry and wake everybody up. We're being decent. So we wound around at about 6 or 7 miles on this gravel road. It said there were 2 camping loops. Well, we passed the first camping loop at about 1.5 miles in or so, and then we get down, and the dead end of this little camping loop was maybe, I think it was just 2 sites. It might have had one on the other side of the road, but it was just a primitive little camping site.
So that was the end of that whole road. You're like 6, 7 miles out in the woods, and it dead ends in a little loop for campsites.
Yep. And it ends in a real dead end, because as you're driving in, if you were to keep going, you'd run right into a big rock wall. And I think folks who are from the Ozarks area or have ever been there would know what I mean. It's there are these big ridges of sandstone cliffs and even hardstone cliffs that are just beautiful, but they're real rugged, and they kind of look like a flagstone walk. If you were to lay it down, it would look like a flagstone walk. Well, this big ridge made a horseshoe around this little cul-de-sac campsite. And I mean little. It's just a tiny little turnaround. And so anyway, we thought this was perfect. We can't bother anybody out here. So we head towards the horseshoe, the dead end, and we make a left and turn into the upper campsite. And so this campsite, we headed straight in. We didn't back in like we usually do, because it was kind of tight to make that turn, and there was a lower site, maybe 9 to 12 feet below this one, and it was right on the road. As you pulled in, you could have just jagged over to the left and pulled into that site, but we wanted the upper one because it's been raining a lot, and we thought it would flood, if we were in the down below one. So
the lower one was pretty close to right where the entrance to the little cul-de-sac was then.
It was right. It was the entrance to the cul-de-sac. Yeah, right there. So we pulled in, and, it wasn't raining, and my husband he is my ex-husband, so I really can't use his name. He wouldn't like it. But he was coughing seriously badly now. And so my brother got out and put up his pup tent. It had a fire ring and a picnic table, and started building a fire. And I just set out. We were sleeping inside the van, so there was nothing for us to prep. We decided to make sandwiches, not cook because everything was wet. But this is when my husband went really downhill. He was really in bad shape. He was coughing. He had pneumonia. He was really bad off. So my brother and I kept trying to talk him into going, let's take you in and have a doc look you over. But nah, wasn't going to do it.
Well, God knows what he swallowed with that water, too. Anyway.
Oh, sheesh, who knows? It was really gray and muddy and awful.
Yeah.
Ugh. And a little more about this campsite was that if you were sitting on the picnic table, which was right next to the van, I mean, 3 feet, 4 feet, maybe 5 feet from the van was facing the road out. And the back of the van was facing the apex of that horseshoe ridge. So on my left was the ridge, went back into deep forest. And as I followed the ridge around to the right, it just ended up going back into deep forest. So I really don't know how far this ridge went, but formed a horseshoe for us. Anyway, it was probably from the fire ring and table at our site was probably 15 feet from that rock wall. So the van was about 18 to 20 feet away from that rock wall on the left, the fire ring side. But the rock wall to the back of the van, I think I said before it was like 30 feet, but it might not even have been that much, because when we pulled the van in to turn it, which didn't have a great turning radius, but still, it would have been difficult to back it in. You'd have had to make a 6-point turn to back that van in because of the proximity of that wall.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a tight little spot, but it was a gorgeous place. And so we're sitting there, we eat sandwiches, and the ex-husband is really doing badly. He's blue, he's shivering, coughing up, just in bad shape. And even though he was protesting, my brother and I said, look, you've got to go to a hospital. And he was too weak to fight it by that time. So, yeah, we had driven around and explored the place earlier, so we kind of knew how to get out of there, but not where to go after we get out of the place. So we go out, we go back to the entrance of the Beaver Lake campground, and there was a ranger parked there. So we pulled up to the window, told him where we were camping, said we had someone in the van that was really, really sick. Where should we go? He told us to go to Rogers, Arkansas. So that's my only point of reference as to where this was. And I should say this happened in 1972. So if my memory is a little goofy,
that's quite a while ago.
Yeah, age does that to you. So anyway, he told us go to Rogers, Arkansas, and he told us how to get there. You leave here and you go there. It was about 12 to 15 miles, I believe. So we took off, and I was driving that clutch Volkswagen, which I hadn't driven very much before. So it was a real rough ride. And a lot of it on gravel road. I mean, it didn't turn to and dark gravel road. It didn't turn to highway until we were about 3 or 4 miles from there. So we get to Rogers, we find the little hospital there. We take him in, and he's out of it. He could hardly walk. So they tried to talk him into staying in the hospital because they said he had water in his lungs and he needed to stay there, and they did x-rays and everything, and we had insurance. We had no reason not to go, but he wanted to stay there. He was like, we're going back camping, I'm fine. So they did their best to talk him, but he wouldn't do it. So we got back to the campground about 5 o'clock in the evening, and we were told we'd have to watch him all night, and if his fever spiked or loss of consciousness, we had to get him back. So we wrapped him up, shivering and coughing, in his sleeping bags in the center of the van, and got back to the picnic table, ate sandwiches again for dinner. And he didn't even eat. He just laid in the van, just shivering and coughing and shivering. And it was miserable. I just knew he was going to die in the night. And since the doctor said, watch him all night, stay up. So I kept the first watch. I can't remember when we went to bed, but it was pretty early.
Now,
And
before you go on any further, this whole time, the day tooling around there and then going to the hospital and coming back again and whatnot, had you guys seen anyone else in that park?
not a soul.
Good Lord.
Except for the ranger, who was only at the front gate for a little while. And I remember this wasn't a weekend. I think we got there like on a Thursday.
Okay.
And I think it was technically, they were expecting the big opening hoop-de-doo on Friday or Saturday. So it wasn't, we just got there early. And so people were probably going to come in, but we were first.
Yeah, it sounds like it was a bad weather weekend anyway. You could have had,
yes,
like a pretty small crowd, all things considered, if it was going to be lousy weather that time of the year.
I totally agree. And a little more about this place. Before we got there, we'd heard that there was some local uprising against building this whole thing for years. It took them years to build it, 6 or 7, maybe more. And the whole time people were being displaced from their homes because they were going to flood this whole area. And yeah. And so we'd heard that people, quote unquote, hillbillies, were getting kind of violent about this whole plan in the beginning. But, after years had gone by and it was going through, I guess that had, settled out. But we heard that and we were aware of it. And we thought, we'll keep our ears open because there might be a big protest or something.
Mm-hmm.
So that was in the far back of our minds, but we were in the camper and in the van and didn't know. I think we crashed early as soon as it got dark, actually, because we were wiped out.
Yeah.
And I had the kids up and out with me for a little while and watched the fire, and it wasn't very cold out. It was pretty mild, and had them up and got them tired out. The baby cried for a little bit, but not really very long. He was fed and diapered, and he went back. He was out, and my little daughter, just a little over a year old, she played in the van for a little bit, and then she went out. So I was sitting on the back bench of the van watching my husband because I wasn't sleeping, and he was sweating. He'd go from sweating to chills and coughing. And my brother was out in his pup tent. I was going to call him in to watch him whenever I felt like I was going to go to sleep. But I was just sitting there. And I think it was after midnight sometime.
What was the weather doing? Was it raining at all anymore at that point?
No, it was drizzling off and on.
Okay.
And if anything, it was really light. But I remember looking up and being able to see stars.
Okay.
So it wasn't even overcast.
Clear. Yeah.
Clear. Mm-hmm. And every once in a while we get a little sprinkle here and there, but it was nothing. It cleared up really nicely. And the area over this cul-de-sac was totally open, so you could see up into the sky, and it was really brightly, starlit. It was really pretty. So I'm sitting there doing my watching the sick guy cough and shiver, and God. I hear a pickup truck come in and down the road, and I'm thinking, oh, I bet you it's the ranger, come to see. Yeah, see where we're going to camp, because there weren't any numbers on these sites or anything, No, it's a pickup truck hauling a little pop-up tent camper, and it's going really, really slow, and I'm thinking, what?
After dark too, yeah.
I'm sure it was after midnight. And why would you choose to come down there? Well, I think they're going to leave because they'll see us here. But no, they pull in to that little cul-de-sac and the roadside spot. And I remember the guy had to go forward all the way towards the rock wall, and then he backed the little pop-up camper into that site. And I'm looking down there. I'm sitting in total darkness except for the fires burning. We stoked it up pretty good. And then I'm looking down out the window at them. And they're really, really quiet. But they got two kids. And they all got in he popped up the camper. I do not believe he even unhooked it. I think he just popped it up. And they all got in it. And I saw their little light come on in it and everything. And there you could hear very quiet movement, and then the lights went out. Maybe 15-20 minutes they were quiet. It was all still, and I'm just sitting there thinking, oh man, the kids are going to wake up. The baby's going to wake up in about 2 to 3 hours crying, and they're going to wake up, but It's not my fault. No,
you tried to camp way out in the middle of nowhere so you wouldn't disturb anybody, and they came and found you.
That's right. So I'm just sitting there, and now I'm getting really, really sleepy. So I was thinking of calling my brother in, and I just my husband was really bad off. I thought he's going to die. He is going to die because he was just bad. And I heard some little animals outside, and usual noises from the fire going and everything, cracking and stuff. Now I'm just sitting there and I'm thinking about laying down, but I'm thinking, I don't know, I'll sit up a little longer here. I'm not quite that tired. So I'm just sitting up and looking around. And all of a sudden, there was this weird, weird sound. And it was far back, way up on the ridge next to us. I mean, way back. And it sounded like a hound dog howl at first, kind of a woo. But then it went way high into a whistle.
Whoa.
It was very strange. I could not recognize it. It started out like a hound dog howling, and it went up into a wheat, a really sharp whistle.
Wow.
I was just sitting there going, what in the world is that? I never heard anything like it. It was so loud, though, even though it came from far away, that my brother unzipped his tent, bugged out of it, opened up the passenger door on the van, and jumped in. And this is where my memory is kind of fuzzy. I can't remember if he got in right then after that woot whistle, or if he got in after what happened next. But at some point, he jumped in. But what happened was maybe half a minute, 30 seconds after that woot, I was hoping the babies wouldn't wake up because, oh my gosh, that it was so sharp at the end. It would have wakened me from a dead sleep. I was hoping that they weren't going to wake up, and I just had a few seconds to think, oh no, if they wake up, I'm going to have to jostle them around really good. But it was so sharp that even my husband, who was so sick and too ill to move, he sat up in his sleeping bag on the floor and said, "What is that?" I said, "I don't know." He said, "Do you see anything outside?" I said, "No." So I laid down. He laid down. I laid down. I laid down on the bench of the van, the back seat, and I had my head towards the fire pit in my brother's tent and that side of the rock wall. So my feet were facing down towards the people in the pop-up tent.
Mm-hmm.
Not very long. I can't remember how long, but minutes. I was laying down like that, just minutes. And he said, did you see anything outside? And I said, no, nothing. And just as soon as I got that out of my mouth, there was this sudden, huge, huge bang that hit the side of the van, right where my head was. Right where my head was. I could feel it jolt my head.
Wow.
It was immense. And you know how your brain tries to tell you what it was? That was... Only thing I could think of was like King Kong had hurled a giant softball at the van. I shot up so fast, so did my ex. And this is where I don't know if my brother was already in the van or if he bugged out and got in the van then. But he was in the van. And we three all of us yelped, it's like, ah! And a few seconds later, my brother peeked up and he looked out the rear view mirror of the van. He said, something's out there. Something's moving, So I pivot around and look out the back window real quick. And I didn't see much. And then my ex is up on his knees now. And he says, hey, there's a shadow back there. Look back by the wall. And I look back by that wall and I can see this big, tall, black shadow going down that little gravel path towards those other campers.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. But it's back against the wall.
Did you think it was like one of the other campers wandering around at that point, or did it look like maybe, something else?
It was so indistinct. I thought bear. Right away I thought bear.
Okay.
And both of the kids started waking up, and so I was putting them back to sleep, and covering their heads and, just cajoling them back to sleep. And the guys were watching. So my husband got out of the sleeping bags and about 10 minutes had gone by and he and my brother decided they'd get out and check the side of the van for a dent or to see what was embedded in it, to see what had happened. Mm-hmm. And so he was saying, oh, I bet it was a rock came off that wall. And I'm like, no, how could a rock would roll off the wall? It wouldn't shoot off the wall.
Right.
And so they're out there looking, and there was not a mark on that van. You could not have told anything touched that van. Nothing. And they were standing there feeling it and looking at it. And I remember my brother putting a couple of more pieces of wood on the fire. And so it was a little bit flaring up. And they looked and they got in and said, there is nothing wrong with it. I go, you've got to be kidding me, and we're talking about it for like 4 or 5 minutes, and so maybe 15 minutes has gone by since the big bang sound. So the guys were getting back into the front seats of the van. They were, they were moving towards, my brother was getting in and my husband was going on the other side, the driver's side, to get in. And I saw them both turn their heads towards the campsite below us. I looked too, and then I could see that the people down there, they were getting up and they were talking in the tent camper, and the little light came on, and there was a lot of action going on in there.
How far away would you say that campsite, the lower one, you said it was like about 12 feet down from where yours was, but I mean, like actual distance between the two campsites, how far do you think it was?
Oh, probably 15 feet.
Oh, geez. So that's like practically right next to you.
Right next to us. I mean, right next. You know, I could look right in their camper when they turn the light on, you know. And so they were looking down there at them. And then I looked down there. I saw them all, the hubbub, you know, they're hustling around. And then they were all getting out of the tent camper. I saw the lights go off the tent camper. I saw the dome light go on in the truck. And everybody's getting in the truck. But the husband was out back with a flashlight doing something. I don't know if he was unhooking the camper or just collapsing it down a little bit because it seemed to sag. And anyway, he gets back into the front of the driver's seat and they drive off. And not very slowly, pretty swiftly, you know, as fast as you could do to make that quick turn on the gravel, you know, and they drove off.
It makes me wonder if, since they were that close, if they heard that big, whatever it was, weighing into the side of your van.
Yeah.
You guys' attention to start with probably woke them up too.
Well, you know, years later with afterthought, I think they heard the woot. It would awaken you. And they heard the woot for sure. And then I'm sure they heard the bang on our car. They had to have. And it was louder than if you'd slammed the door of the car. And so whatever, you know, and then I said the guys looked out, you know, they were looking out back and they saw a shadow move. Maybe they saw whatever it was moving because it moved along the wall in their direction. So years later, I think about this and I go, wow. So anyway, my husband said, I think we should go. And I'm like, let's get out of here, you know. But they now finished getting into the van. My ex was just about in the van when all this happened. And then we heard another whistle come from the back of the van in that rock wall area. And then I could hear, since we had the side door of the van open, the big sliding door open, and they had their doors still open, I heard all this crunchy, crackly stuff, like the brush crunching from the back of the van. So I'm looking out the back window, and we were just sitting there frozen. And we could see something. Not even a shadow. It was more solid than a shadow, but it was moving from that left side on the rock wall, coming down it, like stepping down it and moving towards the back of the van. So going around that horseshoe. And it moved from that fire pit side down that wall, and it was going up towards the apex of that horseshoe. And a few seconds passed, none of us saying anything because this just happened right away. I mean, it's just like boom, boom, boom. I'm staring out the back window and the little fires, you know, it would flare up once in a while. You could see the rock wall pretty good. I'm just staring back there to see what's coming down it. And, you know, in hindsight, I realized it made enough noise that our brains were telling us that's not just a squirrel.
Right.
That's not a raccoon. It's something substantial, you know. So right then, I'm staring out the back window, so I don't know what's going on in the front seat, but my husband presses on the brake pedal at the same time he has it shifted into reverse. And so the back lights, and he turned on the headlights all at once. So we got the headlights of the van on, the back tail lights are on, and that red light, you know, flared up, and it freaked me out because I didn't know he was going to do this. You know, I jumped, holy mackerel, you know, I was like, whoa, you know, and now we could see back there. And I look up front and they're looking back. So I figure out what's going on. So I'm like looking at the scuffling sounds, and it turned a big breaking brush. and little rocks falling, and now it's moving faster. Apparently the lights made it move faster because it's moving faster and it's going around towards the passenger side of the van, where those people are parked down below. And in the headlight, even the headlight glow was being cast off of the rock wall, even though it's facing the other way. It was enough of a light from the sides, I guess, to hit that rock wall. So at about halfway down that ridge, coming down the kind of terracey sides, it was like a terrace coming down that ridge, and moving towards the center of that horseshoe behind us, you could hear it, and you swear you should be able to see it,
Mm-hmm.
and all of a sudden I was able to see it, and my brother and my husband were able to see it really well because they had their heads out the window. It was a really tall, hairy creature. It was standing like a man. It had legs like a man. It had arms and hands like a human. But it was really dark, and you could tell it had hair all over its body, and the tips of the hair glistened like a silver tipped hair would, like gray silver strip tip hair. And it was kind of sparkly as it moved. And I was able to see down its back, it had a lighter gray stripe down its back, kind of like a gray silver patch of fur that went down its back. And it stepped down those ridge rocks, and it was kind of bent over sometimes, and holding on to brush to steady itself. And I would see its hand go around the brush. It was not a paw, it was a hand. And the fingers were kind of weird, like they had an extra joint in the fingers. They were long, like I've heard other people say look like raccoon hands, and that is a great description, like raccoon hands. And so I was just fixated on those hands, and then I look up and I can see the head better, and the head he was twitchy. That's the best way I can put it. He was twitchy. He would look at the van, look at the wall, look at the van, look straight ahead, look down, look at the van, look, just constantly. And his head was not on a swivel. It was like a lock in place and then lock down here and then look up here and then lock down here. Mm-hmm. It wasn't a smooth motion. So he was just hyper aware, I guess. I don't know what you'd say, but it was twitchy.
Right.
And the guys got to see, at least my husband got to see the face pretty good. I got glimpses, and other than the hands, the other weird thing that my brain fixed on was his ears. He had ears on the side of his head, not up on top, but the ears, I could see the fleshy part of the ears, but they had hair on top of them, and the hair on top of them came up like a tuft, like a lynx.
Okay.
Or a small tuft came up. And the tips of that tuft were so silvery that it just glistened in the light, and there's no way you could miss it. That part just was so outstanding, and I just noticed that over and over. And then I noticed that when it turned sideways, its face wasn't flat like a human. It had a big head, a big jaw, and I can't say it had a brow ridge. I didn't see the eye part that well. What I did see the eyes was when it looked at us, they were mean eyes. It's just creepy, horrible, evil eyes. The shape of them and the expression of it was horrible. And the eyes, when they would catch the firelight or the van light, they were like a deep, I don't want to. It's not red, but about as dark gold as you can get going into orange.
Okay.
Odd color, fiery color.
Well, at this point, I should mention for the folks that are listening to the show, Pam actually did that illustration that you guys are looking at.
I have to apologize because none of my illustrations have nailed the creature that I saw, but there's parts of it that are true. I'm not that good at drawing him, but that mouth, I never saw teeth. The guys said they saw teeth. they didn't say they were canine teeth. They just said they saw it raise up its lip and it had teeth. I saw that nose, that, I don't know if you want to call it a snout, I guess, from the side. Now, it was not as sharp as a dog's, but it was definitely protruding and flat. It kind of came out a ways and then came down and then was into the jaw.
Mm-hmm.
It was so unbelievably weird. I could not figure out what I was looking at, but I'm looking at it and it's twitching. It had to be at one point when it stood up, pretty much stood up, it was about 7 feet tall. I remember thinking, wow, that's like a basketball player, or something really tall. But he could have been taller because he was mostly leaned forward coming down those steps. So
Right.
I'm saying 7 feet in the least. And it had no tail. You could see its backside perfectly. It had strong thighs. It had it didn't quite go to a V shape in the waist like a bodybuilder, but it was a barrel chested thing.
Okay.
It was pretty much straight up and down, but when it turned to the right and I could see its front and its chest, it was barrel chested, really big, muscular.
Think you can hazard any kind of a guess on how much you think it might have weighed?
I couldn't even. I have no idea. But I can tell you that it was more like a extremely well-built basketball player
Okay.
than a Sasquatch that's, everybody says is 4 feet wide and all that. He wasn't. He was probably 3 feet wide.
That's still pretty wide.
He was wide, yeah. But he was 3 feet wide all the way down to his waist where it got to be just like 2.5 feet wide. You could tell it went down, but not much. And when he turned sideways, his chest stuck out and then came back in at the neck. And that's why I say barrel chested. Okay. So if you see an animal like a dog, for instance, from the side, and you see where his waist tapers and then it comes down to his front legs, that's the kind of thing this thing had. It had a big chest sticking out. And I'm just looking all over it trying to say, well, no, it's not a bear. No, that's not and I'm just going crazy. I can't figure it out. I'm seeing it use its hands, so I'm like, well, maybe it's a hillbilly. I actually thought maybe this is a guy, with a beard or whatever, but I quickly got that out of my head, but that was in the back of our minds, so it's coming down, and at the end of my viewing it turned the most towards me, and it had the cruelest, most awful, vicious, I want to kill you, death is imminent look on its face.
Yikes.
It was a horrible look, and it was just a split-second little twitch move. He looked at us. I swear I looked him right in the eyes. He was looking right at us, and it was like if eyes could shoot daggers, we'd have all been crushed, It was a violent, horrible look. So right at that moment, the guys just jumped out of the van.
What?
They opened the door. I guess they had talked amongst themselves. I don't know. I'm looking out the back window, so I don't know what they're doing behind me. But all of a sudden, I hear the doors open, and they jump out. And my brother runs around the front of the van to get over by my husband by the driver's door. I'm looking at them because the doors opened, and I'm like, what? And they're over there, and they're watching it go down the ridge. They kept low. They were bent down. My husband and brother were kind of inched down along the side because they were trying to get their heads away from the headlight, I guess, to see. And so I see them kind of huddling over there, and I'm like, what the heck? What are you guys doing? And I'm looking at them at the driver's door. And at that second, I barely am formulating, wow, they've gotten out of the van and now they're looking over there. What are they thinking? When all of a sudden, it's like a cannon shot of gravel hits the van and right over the two guys' heads. I mean, it was like you took a little sand bucket toy full of gravel, pretty small, pretty large, just full of gravel, and you slingshotted it. You were able to eject that gravel out at these guys at 100 miles an hour. I mean, it hit so hard. It hit the windows, it hit everything. It was just the loudest sound. And most of it went over their heads, but a bunch of it hit them. And that's when they just jumped in the van. My brother ran around the other side, got in. My husband got in the car, and he's rolling up his window. And now I'm turned back to see where the gravel came from. And I just can't see anything. There's nothing out there. Not even the one that was walking down that I just last saw. There's nothing out there. So we're just breathing heavy. We're just like scared out of our wits. And I tell you, all three of us had the worst, most dread fear. I had this incredible feeling of loss of hope. Like, there's no hope. You're a goner. You're dead. I've never felt anything like that. I mean, it was horrible. And I know the other two felt it too, because they just had the look on their face of like, this is it, And we're looking, and then he started up the car. He started up the van. And I yelled to him, "What were you thinking?" And they both said, "Well, we saw it at one turn and we thought it was a guy. So we were going to get out and harass him for scaring us." And I think it was about the time, actually, when my brain was thinking, is that a hillbilly? They must have thought that too. I thought maybe he's wearing overalls. I'd got this picture of a hillbilly in my head, Well, anyway, they thought it was a guy, and they were going to get out and yell at him. And and then they saw what I saw, that horrible look it shot us. And then the gravel came, so they had to duck. And while we were all ducked and freaking out, it disappeared. It left. So anyway, he's got the car fired up, and he's asking me to look out the back so he can back out well. And he's shaking. He's totally sick still. But he's running on adrenaline, obviously, and he's just shivering, shaking, and he's backing it up. And I go, I better drive. And fuzzy. But anyway, we got out of there. And it was just horrible. We turned, we went around there, we passed a little pop-up trailer, and we were heading down that horrible gravel road in the absolute pitch dark, because now on the road you've got woods on both sides, so you don't get hardly any starlight. And I mean, we were going as quickly as we could, and it was horrible. And so, I mean, all three of us, we're just sitting there thinking we're going to die. I mean, it didn't go away when we pulled out. We were still thinking that for a good, I bet, almost till we got to the end of that road, which is about 7 miles long. And the only way we knew which way to go was to go towards Rogers, where we went for the hospital.
Well, next time you see a little road like that with a sign that says "No Hope Road,"
Yeah.
Go camp.
Yeah. All ye who travel here,
Got a skull and crossbones, says Camp No Hope. Did you have any sense that you guys were being actually like followed or chased after you left the cul-de-sac there?
No, at the time, no. We just had that dread fear, the worst sense of dread. It was so bad that it was hard to motivate to move to get out of there. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I mean, it was like, just give up, just resistance is futile, the Borg mantra. It was like going through mud to get out of there. Everything was just horrible. And when we got down to the end of the road was when it passed. We finally were like, okay, we got a little bit of gravel, and then we'll hit that highway part and we'll be safe. And so we just floored it. And we didn't get all the way into Rogers. We got right outside of Rogers, and there was a little white store, a little country store with a big street light there. And we wheeled in there, came to a halt right under the street light. And of course, it's the middle of the night, early morning hours, nobody's there.
Right.
We just parked there, shut everything off. And that was the first chance we had to breathe. And I'm telling you, that adrenaline dump happened, and we were all just sitting there like empty shells. I mean, we couldn't even talk. And then finally we started talking about it. And I said, what the heck was that? And my ex was so bad off, he had to go get in the back seat and lay down again. He was covered up with all the sleeping bags, and he was just covered up. And my brother and he and I were talking, and my brother kept saying to us, well, what I saw was a big deformed animal. I think it was either a bear with deformities, or it was a very, very large German Shepherd, but he was really deformed. And I kept saying, listen, when did a German Shepherd stay on two legs and walk down like that and use its hands, not paws, to move branches? That was not a German Shepherd. And he kept saying, it had to be. I know it was. It had to be. And he was just freaked out. And my husband kept saying, maybe it was some kind of a bear. Did you see that face? Did you see? And I kept saying, yeah, I saw the face. It wasn't a bear. Well, it had to be a bear. Maybe it's some kind of bear they got down here or something, you know? And I'm like, yeah, he wasn't raised in the woods like we were. I knew it was no bear. And I'm just sitting there.
Just for additional info, it might be interesting to note at this point that the nickname amongst law enforcement up in central Canada for these Type 3s is the Bear Man.
I could see that. I could definitely. That is way better description. Yes. And I kept going back and forth. But then I saw the ears and I saw the hands. That kept coming into my brain, was that I fixated on those two parts. And
yeah,
it just did not. I was just shook to the core. So we're all just sitting there, and there's no sleep, you know, you're just sitting there. And then right around 6 a.m. or so, I could tell that these were the people coming to open the store. They came, and they probably wondered what we're doing sitting there.
yeah.
And they came in and they opened the store, and I went in to use the bathroom, and my brother went in, and I got some baby food jars, and I felt like I had to buy something, you know.
Right.
And I got cough syrup for him, for my husband. So I got up the nerve to ask the guy at the register some questions. I said, we were just camping, you know, and I want to know what are the big creatures you have in the wood here, you know? And they just kind of looked at me, and I said, they probably thought I was some sort of a druggie, you know, because I'm young, I'm in this camper,
Hippie
whatever.
Man, 1972, yeah.
You got it. So I told him where we're from, that we're camping, we have our two kids, and how we got spooked out of our campsite by this big animal. I said, do you have bears here that can walk upright? And he looked at me and he says, the guy behind the register said, I'm sure the bears here are normal and do not walk upright. And he was just as deadpan faced as could be. And he said, where are you camping? And I said, it was over in Beaver Lake, and we were the first ones there. And he says, oh, it's probably displaced animals and stuff, you know. He says, yeah. So I said, he said, well, campers and stuff in that area hear noises all the time. I said, yeah, well, we heard this really loud whistle, and you know, this other campers were chased out, I think, by the same thing. And he didn't even pay any attention. We just took my money, you know, and it was like, no big deal. So we got back in the van, and we slept for about an hour as it, and the kids were up, so I didn't get to sleep much. I was just keeping the kids awake and doing this and that. And my husband was really ill, but he had some strength back. So we ate all of our camp foods that we had out of the cooler and stopped for gas and potty breaks. But we went straight back to Kansas, straight home. And all the way back, the guys are saying, let's don't tell anybody. We'd be called crazy, and don't tell your dad, because he'll think we're on drugs, you know, and we're saying, Dad knows we're not on drugs, you know. And he said, let's just tell him because I had this drowning accident. We came home early. And everybody was surprised when we came home early. But I wanted to tell my dad, but the guys made me swear not to. My brother and I had graduated high school really early, and he he at 16 was already accepted at a school for veterinary stuff, and he was going to be going to that. He didn't want word getting around that, he'd seen a creature or something. He said it would ruin his scholarship. My husband had a very good paying job, and he was afraid of that and his parents' disapproval. So
Right.
I didn't agree until I was convinced that no one in their right mind would really believe us anyway. So I just didn't say anything, and I just pushed it back. And then about a year later, I heard about Bigfoot sightings. And later than that, even, I saw the Patterson-Gimlin thing, and I thought, oh, we saw a Bigfoot.
Mm-hmm.
Because that was, the only weird thing out there.
Yeah.
And they had a picture, but it wasn't the one we saw. But, it had to be a Bigfoot. So I saw Wes Germer's show, and I heard it. And he was asking for people that had any weird encounters to email him. So I emailed him the whole story. And this is when Will Jevning was his co-host.
Right.
So I emailed it to him, and he said, hey, I'd like to have you on and do a show. And so I said, well, I don't know. I hem-hawed around. But then I said, okay, I'll do it, because he said, it helps other people who see them. So we talked before we did the taping, just for a few minutes, not very long, under and half an hour. And Will Jevning was on the line. He said, he brought to my attention that I didn't see a Bigfoot, but I saw a dogman type of Sasquatch animal, and I had not ever heard of such a thing.
Mm-hmm.
I had looked online at a few Bigfoot things, but I never found anything like it, And then he told me that that's what I'd seen, and I said, oh, wow, huh. I said, are you sure that isn't a werewolf? And he said, no, they've been misidentified for a long time as werewolves. So I said, oh, man, because he said that nose sticking out like that, and maybe the tufts on its ears and the meanness, they're all characteristic. So I was like, wow. And then he told me to look up the Beast of Seven Shoots photo. That was pretty close, So anyway, I tried doing my drawings, but they're just aspects of them are right, not perfect by a long shot. But I later I heard you on, and so I was known as the dog man sighter, and that's what everybody said. Oh, she's seen the dog man, and I'm like, yeah, because that's all I knew. So later you were on Wes's show, and you were talking about the various Native American names for the variety of creatures, Wendigo and Gugwe and these different ones, and how each one was named by the Native Americans, and each one was a different creature. So you wouldn't say, well, I saw a dogman Bigfoot, I wouldn't have said that. I guess it's just a dogman at that point. But after I heard your show, and then we talked, I heard you say Gugwe, and then I asked, do you have any pictures? Can you tell me about this? Because he sounds like what I saw. And so I started being able to look up Gugwes, and I believe my sighting was of a Gugwe. It hits on all the points, and I haven't found anything that hits it better. So that the dogman is always spoken of, evil looking, bold, dogman thing, but it has a tail, ears up on the top of its head, and dog-like legs.
Right.
I don't know about the hands or paws, but this did not confirm. This had human-type legs and hands, except maybe an extra joint in those fingers, and ears were definitely on the side of his head, and the tufts sticking up maybe the tufts sticking out the top of the head make it look like they were up there, but this thing was just as vicious and bold and evil looking, and you definitely knew that if it had an opportunity, you were its next meal.
Yeah.
So,
well, and interestingly enough, the theory that we're working with right now is that they're pack hunters too, and it sounds like you had more than one of them there. The one sort of got caught in the light and didn't know what it should do, but it was like the forward scout. And so it was like, the head on a swivel twitching sort of thing.
Yes.
And then you got gravel chucked at you from another direction.
Right.
And you heard a answering whistle. And the other thing that confirms on it possibly being a Gugwe is you're talking about that weird howl into a whistle type sound. Even in the native legends and stuff, they'll tell you that these things like to communicate by whistling, and they coordinate hunting whistling.
That totally makes sense. And now after being on Sasquatch Chronicles and being in the forum a lot and learning so much as I have, I realized that gravel did not come from the one I was looking at, because I was looking at it at the moment the gravel hit the guys. So there had to be another one. There had to be probably several, because, the first woot came from far away on our far left. Then this one was coming down, and then the gravel.
Right.
And
this is like
you're right.
A typical Bigfoot type of maneuver, too, because, like, say you've got a couple of them around your camp or something, one on the right, one on the left. Well, when the one on the left wants to move, the one on the right will make a noise and get your attention to look to the right. And then the one on the left will move while you're not paying any attention looking that direction.
Yep, that makes sense. And then also what I've thought about is how vulnerable we were. There's 3 males in the vehicle, 1 female, and then 2 really little babies. So if you wanted dinner, you'd have a very young male at 16, a female at 19, a very ill, whom they would have seen as the alpha male, was very ill, coughing, hacking loudly. You could tell he was sick, and the 2 infants. So there was 3 easy meals right there.
Yeah, and you're out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, they
nowhere.
Looked at your little VW van like it was a Kentucky Fried Chicken bucket on wheels coming toward them when they saw that thing.
There you go. Yeah. So they only had a 16-year-old boy and a 19-year-old woman to defeat, and they had dinner. And that slap on the side of the van, we all of us popped up right away immediately. So they had a head count.
Right. Which could have been exactly why they did it.
Yeah.
Let's go up and whap the vehicle and see what pops its head up. What are we dealing with here?
Sitting ducks. So, and we did not back in for once. We usually back into a campsite and everything, but the door would have been on the wrong side of the picnic table. So sliding the sliding door open, that was a deciding factor. We'll head in, but oh man, we were, now I look back on it, all the factors, everything that was going on, what if we stayed there? But there was no thought of that. All 3 of us were panicked with that dread fear. And it was like fighting through molasses to move ourselves to get out of there, because that fear was so overwhelming. It was just like, we got to go now, we got to pack up. Nope, we left everything. We did not take anything. We never went back. And I wonder about those campers. Did they ever go back for that pop-up? Probably with an army, because they left it there.
Makes you wonder if all that stuff got left there, what the Rangers thought when they finally showed up to check up on the campsite. There's a tent there. There's a pop up there. There's no people there.
The fire was roaring.
Here,
Our fire's going, and I think we left food on. Well, we had food in the inside, but I think we had things on the table that were, a lantern or something. But no, we didn't even think about it.
The table was gone before they got back there.
No kidding. Well, I think we had a lantern out there and a couple of, we didn't even think about that. We got home, and everybody's like, well, you're home early, and Charlie has to go to the doctor, so we took the ex to the doctor and all that stuff. So it was just hush hush. Now, many years later, I tell my dad, I said, what do you think about this Bigfoot thing, Dad? And he grew up around Mineral, Washington, Tacoma, Washington. He was he was a child of his dad was a railroad brakeman and engineer, and they would lay the track into the woods, log it, and then drive out with the logs, and so he grew up in lumber camps. And he told me, he said, nothing's impossible. He said, when I was a kid, I was 5, 6, 7. We were in the lumber camps near Mineral, and they told us not to go. We could not step foot into the woods. We could only be in the clearing, because the boss of the woods would either take you or throw you bodily back into the logging camp.
Oh my God.
And he said, the boss of the woods, and they said, yeah,
That's Bigfoot.
He's the boss of the woods, and he'll throw it. But Dad never knew. He just thought it was one of the logging guys.
Yeah.
You know, he thought, well, if he's gonna, you know. So he stayed. He said none of the kids went into the woods at all, but they had chickens that would, because they had the logging camp there. They took everything. He said the chickens would go into the woods and they'd never come out. So, yeah. And so he said he'd often wondered if the boss of the woods wasn't some big animal like that. But that was as close as I ever got to telling anybody. I never told anyone. And so all these years later, you know, I told my husband, my present husband, when we got married, we were talking about crazy things that had happened, and crazy things happen to me all the time, it seems like. Everybody says, oh, it's another adventure with Pam. So I don't know if I'm a weirdness magnet or what, but I told him about this, and he was like, wow, really? You know, 27 years later, you know, I tell him, well, I'm going to do another radio show. And he goes, really? You know, he knows they're real. He does. He's listened to the shows, you know, for the past 3-4 years. And he's a total believer. I'm a knower, and he doesn't want to be a knower. And I don't want to know anymore either. I do not research. I do not go out looking for them. I'm hyper aware when I camp, when I'm anywhere where there's cover. I am really aware, and I always have been, and I always will be.
Well, I'll tell you what, you know, sometimes I wish I could go from being a knower back to being a hardcore skeptic or something, because it's not that fun. And,
No.
Side note, interestingly enough, I had my encounter with the Type 4 the same year you had your encounter with the Type 3.
Is that right? Wow.
72.
Yep. Yeah. That was an interesting year.
That was they can keep that year. That was a creepy year. That was a bad one.
That was a bad one. Mentioning that, we all had, I don't care what people call it, we three have called it PTSD for years afterwards. Years. I had horrible nightmares of gorillas chasing me in the woods. I had nightmares of German shepherds tearing us up. My brother would tell me, he had gone down to Arizona to go to school, and he would write me a letter every once in a while and say, do you still have nightmares? You know, and man, I've been having nightmares. And for years, I bet 10 or 11 years, we talked about it. He won't talk about it now. He wants nothing to do with it. He's blocked it out of his mind. I asked him in the presence with my husband one time, I said, Bruce, you remember that thing we saw down in Arkansas, that whole experience? And he goes, I just can't go there. He says, I just crumble. I can't go there. And he said, but I'll tell you, it was something. I don't know what it was. I still think it was a deformed dog thing. A German shepherd. And my husband was standing there, and he's like, what? Because my brother is one of the most reasonable, intelligent people you'd ever know. For him to say something like that, it's just stupid.
He's just trying to convince himself. He knows he's not convincing anybody else.
It has to be, but that's how he can live with it. So, and I've heard other people say that about when there's multiple people in an encounter. Some of them just like, nope, didn't happen, not going to think about it.
Well, even if they all totally agree that they saw something and they're willing to talk about it, they'll all seem like they focus on different aspects of the creature. Like one of them will notice the teeth really well, and another one, like maybe they'll notice the width of the shoulders, and another one will notice the fingernails on it were broken and straight. Just some weird part of the anatomy that you wouldn't think of, but for some reason their attention gets drawn to it, and that's what they focus on. And I think it's just because the whole thing is such a shock to their brain in general that their brain sort of shuts down and just goes into overload mode, and it's trying to make sense out of what it's seeing. And then whatever is hitting your eyes at that moment is what sort of gets collected into your brain and kept there.
That's exactly it. I feel like my brain just shut down and went into record mode because I was looking at the hands and I was looking at the ears, and I'd look at the hands and the ears, and those are the two things. And I think I was trying to say, are those hands a human?
Yeah.
But those ears aren't a human.
Well,
But the
speaking of
hands are human.
I know it was dark and it wasn't like exactly right next to you, but did you get enough of a look at him to see if it had nails on its fingers, or what did that look like?
Too indistinct. I couldn't tell.
Okay.
You know, it was flickering light basically. Right. And I didn't see it I saw it from about mid calf up. Okay. I did not see the feet.
Couldn't see the feet.
He was always covered in dark or in the brush or whatever. But the leg was definitely human. There was no dog hawk or backward bend or
right.
It was in every shape, size, and form a human being, except the ears had that weird tuft. And when it turned sideways, it had that barrel chest and the weird snout.
Yeah.
So it was an amazing creature.
I really think you saw a Gugwe. I don't think it was a regular dog man, if there is such a thing as a regular dog man. According to Vic, there's several varieties of those things too, but I stay out of that territory. I'm just only interested in the Bigfoot-like creatures, and you know, in the long run, it kind of wouldn't have made that much difference which one you were dealing with, because they both have a really, really lousy reputation of being, you know, very violent, very dangerous to be around. You know, if you see one, get out of the area before it sees you. If it sees you first, good luck. Hope your will's written out. You know, that sort of thing. So, yeah, from my standpoint, I think you guys were both in a lot of danger, that there was a group of them, a troop, a pack, whatever you want to call, that had basically decided that you guys were going to make a viable meal. And looks like, you know, they were in a position where they were trying to get down around that van before you guys could really take off and do anything, and it just kind of didn't work out that way for them.
Yep. I don't know if they can project fear, but they had it going on, because I think if we'd been weaker people, if we'd been weaker people or untrained campers or something, we might have just huddled down, you know, out of abject fear and tried to just wait out the morning there. But because it was hard to get motivated. I mean,
right.
we all three were of one thought: we have to go now. As much, you know, there wasn't a hesitation, but it was really impending doom fighting.
Well,
There's weirdness.
Bear and Kumbo both yell at me if I don't bring this up at this point, which I probably should then. Is that could be an infrasound thing.
Oh, yeah.
One of the things being zapped with infrasound is it can make you feel that sense of impending doom and terror that you don't seem to know where it's coming from. Just all of a sudden there's this feeling there, and that's one of the things it can do. And that's been scientifically tested. So
I never thought of that.
But it could be possible that the Type 3s can project infrasound. You know, I don't know any reason why they couldn't. If 1s and 2s could do it, why couldn't the 3 do it? I don't know.
I never thought of that. And, you know, I think I just said in this interview that all three of us at the same time, just our shoulders went right down.
And you didn't get that reaction from when you first saw it or anything.
No.
You were just freaked out going, what is this thing? It wasn't a terror reaction. It was a confusion reaction. And then all of a sudden, when you're not looking at it, you're all hit by terror. To me, that sounds like it was probably one of them was probably zapping you with infrasound.
You know, you may be right, because it was otherworldly, unreal, and it hit us all. And we were just like, must move now, you know, robotically
when you feel
fighting.
Like you're wading through like weighted down oatmeal, and your body doesn't want to respond.
Time slowed down.
Overwhelming feeling of apathy taking you over.
Yeah.
Give up. You can't escape.
Exactly. And we even talked about that on the way home. I remember that now. We said, what the heck? You know, did you feel like we weren't going to get out of there? And we were all trying to describe how we were feeling. I said, I thought we were done. I thought, there's no way. Just give up. Just give up now, because there's no way. And we all three felt it, and that was just not in us. You know, we were hyper freaky, you know, just like, whoa. And then we're like, okay, well, should we go or shouldn't we? You know, no, it was like, got to get out of here now. But it hit us all at once. So you may be right. I never thought of that. Never would have thought of it. And it didn't go away until we were quite a ways down the road. We started kind of waking up.
Right. You know, some people, if they're zapped with infrasound pretty good, I guess it can take them, even a couple days to recover from it, from the disorientation and whatever other emotions and stuff that they had at the time. So it could last with you for a while. From what I understand, don't quote me on this, anybody. Not an expert on infrasound, just going by what I've heard from Baron Kuhnbo talking about it. And, I actually am in the same boat with Bear on one thing, and that's that in as much as they can go in that deep range underneath what we can hear, they might be able to go into that higher range above what we can hear too, like a dog whistle range. And ultrasound, if they can generate it, would explain how Bigfoot can make all the little critters in an area shut up. Like instantly everything is silent. Well, all those little critters, all the bugs and stuff operate in that ultrasonic range. They hear it and emit it. So if you made a really loud ultrasonic sound, we wouldn't hear it, but all the bugs would.
Right. And you know that the first big loud whistle woot thing that ended with that sharp whistle,
right,
that had to be on the verge of ultrasound.
Mm-hmm.
It tore through your ears. Like I said, even though you could tell it was far away, everyone woke. Everyone, you could not have slept through that. So just being able to get to that range with a vocal cord is amazing. Anything's possible.
Yeah, well, like I said, I've heard several different historical legends and reports of these things using whistles to communicate with. In fact, there's one Bigfoot person that says that if you're out in the woods, you should never whistle, because if there's one around the area, it'll hear you whistling and think you're like one of them trying to say something that's coming out garbled and weird. And
oh, man.
Over to see what's going on.
No thanks. I will keep that in mind.
So yeah, if you're ever out with a Boy Scout troop or something, don't let them whistle.
No. Or the Seven Dwarfs. No whistling while you work.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I would like to see sign. I would like to see footprints, tracks, whatever. I enjoy your videos, but I do not ever want to lock eyes on anything like that again. I've had it, it just, I think it would just drop me to the ground.
Yeah, I'm not in any hurry to see another one again. I mean, the main reason that I even go out and do anything in the woods anymore is just because I'm trying to gather more information on them. Unlike probably every other researcher out there who's got their camera ready. Oh God, I hope Bigfoot pops up so I can take a picture. No. I'm not trying to take a picture of Bigfoot. I don't want to get a picture of Bigfoot. I don't want to see Bigfoot again. I just want to go where they are and collect more evidence and figure out what it is they're up to and how they do things.
And see, that makes sense.
Yeah, what do all these tree structures mean and stuff? Well, guess what? If you find enough of them and you start looking for correlations, you can start figuring it out. We've got actually a lot of it figured out at this point, well, what we think. But, it's like, okay, I think it means this, and therefore let's go test it. And yes, it comes out that way. Well, that's a scientific method. You've got a variable and you test it. And if it keeps coming out one way, you can start pointing in that direction going, it seems to look like it means blank.
It's a hypothesis that,
Yeah.
You know what I've wondered about the tree structures and the ground structure things, these things like Rio, Utah Squatch was talking about glyphs laid on the ground. People are seeing these little A's all over the world, written out on the ground with sticks and twigs. I wonder if a cryptolinguist like Scott Nelson, is that his name? He deciphers languages.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if he was given a number of photographs of these glyphs or tree structures that are all repeated everywhere. Could he possibly, wend something out of that? Because there has to be something to it when you have it happening all across the country in the same manner, in the same forms. There is something to that,
Yeah, it wasn't that long ago that they got, God, I can't think of his last name, Jimmy something or another. He's down in Texas and he's a fingerprint expert, and he worked in crime all of his life. And somebody got him on the Bigfoot thing and went, hey, go take a look at some of the marks on these casts and stuff. And he started looking at them going, well, there's dermal ridges on here. No
Yeah.
hoaxer is going to carve dermal ridges on their fake wooden foot. Seriously, come on. You
Yes.
know? And Jimmy Chilcutt. Does that sound right?
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah.
And he went from there's no such thing as Bigfoot to whoa, I'm pretty sure Bigfoot's real just from that. Looking at the
Exactly.
evidence that they've got of some of these things that actually show dermal ridges. They've got fingerprints, you know.
At least his interest was piqued, and he's doing something the other scientific community isn't.
Right.
He's looking into it.
Well, and that's my point. If you can get some of these people from other disciplines that aren't necessarily Bigfooters interested enough to look at the evidence, we might be able to find out all sorts of interesting things that, you know, nobody's been able to put together yet because you just haven't had anybody in that discipline working with the Bigfoot people.
That's right. That is exactly correct. Imagine how far forward the research would be if we had, you know, Dr. Meldrum does what he can do, you know, and
Yeah.
Dr. Bildernagel, he has brought the study way ahead, you know, but
Yeah.
just think if we had a whole community of people. What if we had National Geographic working on
Oh,
it?
God.
You know,
Yeah,
and
can
why
you imagine
aren't
a
they?
National Geographic special on Bigfoot, how cool that would look.
Oh, man, and why haven't they? Why aren't they that interested?
Yeah. Well,
How
you
much
know.
do they get paid not to look into it?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, you got to figure that most, and I'm being general here, but most of the scientists that are big name or whatever, they're essentially getting their money from the government.
Right, in grants.
So, yeah, you know, and unless you're a tenured professor that can't be fired, Jeff Meldrum, you're probably not going to have that much interest in doing it because you're just going to get a lot of ridicule out of it, possibly lose your job, and have your boss that pays your check show up and go, no, we don't research Bigfoot. Stay off that subject.
That's right. All of our grants will disappear for some reason. And, you know, I don't know so much that it's government cover up, but I would lean more towards that it's big corporation cover up because that's where the real money is. I think
Well,
that
who do
big
you think the government
corporations.
really is? You know, we're
Yeah.
talking about the deep government, the shadow government.
Yeah.
We're not talking about when you talk about Bigfoot cover up, you're not talking about elected government. They come
No.
and go. They are not allowed to know things like this. The people that are in there for their whole lives that are not elected, that's the real government. They're the ones that are making those decisions. They're the ones that have the people working for them that are keeping it hushed up.
I agree. And I can see where big money would not benefit from this. Whereas, you know, and how they could influence agencies, especially in an era of budget cuts. You know, you have a huge corporation that says, oh, no, you don't. We have plans for that area.
Yeah.
You know, we're going to drill, log, whatever there. And, you know, we don't want to hear about any unusual animals. So
Well, we're on the subject. Let me throw out two quick little anecdotes here to make everybody's brain melt down. I got a friend who has a picture of a golf ball. And the golf ball is laying in the grass, and you can see the name of the golf ball maker on the golf ball. And it's altogether unremarkable picture of a golf ball laying in the green grass. Except this picture was taken from satellite 1969.
Oh, my gosh.
So if they could see the name on a golf ball from satellite in 1969, what do you think the satellites can do now? Anecdote number 2. I know for a fact we have thermal satellites that can see heat signatures, and they can see it down to a very small level.
Yep.
In fact, if somebody is high enough priority and gets lost, they can actually call on the data from these infrared satellites from the previous couple days and get a readout of what big heat blobs were in that area and figure out where that person is by doing that. So
Wow.
now, if we can see a human-sized heat blob from space, you don't think that they know that Bigfoot's there? Seriously.
Exactly. Yes. That's an awfully big heat blob.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, especially you get these heat blobs, it's like human shaped, but like 3 times as big.
Yeah.
That's not Andre the Giant's big kid running around out there.
Don't you wonder what I'd like to know what the analyst that looks at all that data, what he sees or she sees in a day's work. You know, there's probably so much out there we don't want to know.
Well, yeah, like the movie line, you don't want the truth, you can't handle the truth. That's
That's
probably
true.
fairly true. There's probably a bunch of people out there that, if they really knew what was going on, would just melt down. Yeah,
They
they just couldn't even deal with it.
lock the doors, shut the windows, and cease to exist. Yep.
Pretty much. So, I can understand from that standpoint why they want to keep some of this stuff from people. But to me, Bigfoot is a safety issue. Yeah, ones and twos are not that dangerous, but if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, they can be dangerous too. And threes and fours, thank goodness they're rare, but they are dangerous.
They
So
are.
people need to know that these things are out there, so at least they have some idea. It's like, are you going to let somebody go camping in grizzly territory and not tell them grizzly bears are there? You're going to tell them grizzly bears are imaginary while they're camping in grizzly territory? Really?
Exactly. And how many people go anyway? So it's not holding you back.
No.
It's being forewarned.
No. And
That's
the other
all
thing, they always
we
say is,
want.
oh my God, if we let everybody know that Bigfoot is real, then there'll be all these crazy people out there trying to shoot Bigfoot. There's crazy people out there trying to shoot Bigfoot right now.
That's right.
What
Yeah.
makes you think they're going to be any more successful if they somehow know that it's real?
Yeah, and grizzly bears, they can't shoot back or fight back, basically. I mean, if you get a group of hunters that wants to kill one, they get them. But in the case of Sasquatch, you're not just going out there with your 22 and going to bag one. So they don't need protection.
No. And generally, you need protection from them. Generally, there's more than one. And, we're like, oh, we're so cocky. We can kill things at long range. Yeah, they're cocky too. They can kill things at long range. They've got this thing called boulder that they can throw at you. And they're very accurate. If they decide to hit you with one, they're going to hit you with one.
That's right. And if you put up signs on a forest trail that said Sasquatch have been sighted in this area, these are things you need to look for: large footprints, tree breaks, whatever.
Yeah.
Like you would put up for a grizzly bear. Okay.
Exactly.
Now, listen to this. People would line up in droves to take that trail. They would be paying the Forest Service tons of dollars in fees to take that trail. So it's not because it's going to
be willing to sign off on a risk statement saying that they take all liability themselves in order to do it.
That's right. And so that shoots down the theory that, well, it would kill the dollars going into the forest from campers and hikers. Are you kidding? It would be the biggest boon to them. In a million years, you wouldn't get a better advertising campaign.
Yeah.
So it's not that.
I don't buy the logging industry answer either, because the logging industry in the U.S. has actually gotten smaller over the last few years, not bigger.
Yeah, no. And if they want it, they'll get it. They get, that's not it. Yeah, it's something else. But, it's beyond me why they don't. But.
Well, I got my guesses, but I'm not going to say anything because I want to keep doing the show. So anyway,
that's another show.
Yeah, that's somebody else's another show. But thanks for coming on the show again. And I think this is the third time here as the charmer, and it actually recorded this time. Last time we tried this, it recorded Pam, and it didn't record my voice. So hopefully you got.
Imagine hearing that.
Yeah. Yeah, I was actually going to go back and try and put in, questions and stuff, and it was just too confusing. I was this is never going to work.
Keep it simple.
But I really appreciate it so much, because there's so few people that have had encounters with these things that can come on and talk about them. The threes and the fours, you just don't find very many people that have had encounters with these things that can tell you the story, because in order to tell the story, you have to survive the encounter.
Yeah.
And until very, very recently, I had never met anyone else that had an encounter with a Type 4. And because I helped a guy do a mock-up of one, which was sitting on my Facebook group, and then was actually taken to the Bigfoot Outlaws group, and somebody on there saw it and contacted me directly and went, holy bleepity bleep bleep bleep, that's exactly what I saw back in the 70s. Down in Tennessee, and I thought I'd never be able to tell anybody this story because they'd all laugh it off and say I was crazy, but that's exactly it, except the one I saw had brown fur. So, okay, so that makes me feel great, because it's all right, there's somebody else that's seen one of these things and survived it. They don't always get you.
There's hope for mankind.
Yes. According to my statistics, at least 2% of people that encounter them survive. It was 1%. Now I think I'm going to crank it up to 2%.
Yeah, that is true. That's funny. Yep.
But, yeah, you never know how stuff like that's going to go around, and that's one of the reasons I was working with the artist there to try and put together a fairly accurate looking picture of one of these things, just in the off chance that somebody else had actually seen one and would contact me, and bingo bango, there they did. But for me, it was so difficult because I've got PTSD from it, and I've been trying to forget what it looked like for decades, not remember it in excruciating detail. And then the closer the artist gets the rendition to the way it actually looks, the more shocking it is when you see it. And then you get this, terror reaction all over again. The third time, I actually had to go outside and sit outside for like 10 minutes and stop hyperventilating. That was pretty ridiculous.